Okay, so you know how sometimes you just feel more ready to learn something new?
Hmm.
Like some days you're all in, ready to tackle anything.
Yeah.
And other days, it's like pulling teeth just to get started.
Oh, totally. Motivation can be a fickle thing.
Well, today we're diving deep into the psychology behind that. Specifically, how the way you feel before you even begin learning can totally change the game.
That initial spark.
Exactly. We're looking at this research paper you sent over, Motivational Effects on Self-Regulated Learning with Different Tasks, by, let me see, Regina Vollmeyer and Felko Reinberg from way back in 2006.
Ah, classic study.
Right. It's all about this idea they call the cognitive motivational process model, which basically means your initial motivation sets off this whole chain reaction.
It impacts how you learn, what strategies you use.
And ultimately, what you actually get out of the experience. We're going to try to unpack all that and, more importantly, figure out what it means for us as, lifelong learners.
Because let's be real, we're all trying to learn new stuff all the time.
Right. All the time. So Vollmeyer and Reinberg, they really focused on four big things when it comes to that initial feeling you have toward a new task.
Like imagine you're faced with something you've got to learn.
Right.
First off, there's your belief in whether you can actually pull it off. They call this probability of success. Do you think you've got what it takes?
And then there's that nagging feeling of, what if I mess up? Anxiety. Can't forget that one.
Oh, anxiety's a big one. But it's not always a bad thing. We'll get into that.
Definitely. Then there's simple interest, right? Like, are you actually curious about this topic? Does it grab your attention?
If it's boring from the get-go, good luck staying motivated.
Exactly. And lastly, there's the challenge aspect. Do you see this as something worth achieving? Like it'll actually give you a sense of accomplishment.
Because if it feels too easy, why bother, right?
Yeah.
Needs to be that sweet spot of challenge.
Right. So those four things, probability of success, anxiety, interest, challenge, those are the building blocks of their model.
And they didn't just stop there. They wanted to see how those feelings actually play out in the real world.
Yeah, like, does being pumped at the start actually translate into better results?
Exactly. And that's where the whole process model comes in.
Right. They broke it down into these three phases. You've got the initial motivation. That's our starting point.
Then there are these mediators, things that get influenced by that initial motivation, like how much time you spend learning.
The strategies you use.
Even your motivation during the learning process itself, which can totally change, by the way.
And then, of course, the big finale, the learning outcome. What did you actually learn? Can you use that knowledge?
Makes sense. Right. It's like a domino effect.
Totally. So let's start at the very beginning with that probability of success idea. Seems pretty intuitive, doesn't it? If you think you're going to fail, you're probably not going to be super motivated.
It's all about self-belief, right? That confidence in your own abilities. They actually tie this back to something called self-efficacy. Your belief that you can succeed in a specific situation.
So if I think I'm good at math,
You're more likely to be motivated to learn advanced calculus.
but if I struggle with writing,
Starting a novel might seem way more daunting.
makes sense. But what about anxiety? How does that fit into the picture? It's not just the opposite of being confident, right?
No, not at all. You can be good at something and still be totally freaked out about messing up, especially if there's pressure, like a big presentation or something.
Like, I know I can write, but the thought of public speaking makes me sweat.
Exactly. And the researchers, they actually call anxiety a negative incentive.
Yeah.
It's like this feeling of, I think I can do this, but I really, really don't want to screw it up.
So it can actually push you to try harder, even if it's not exactly a pleasant feeling.
Sometimes that fear of failure can be a powerful motivator, even if it's a bit stressful.
Okay, makes sense. Now, interest. This one seems pretty straightforward. If you find the topic fascinating, you're going to be way more motivated to learn, right?
Absolutely. Interest is all about having that positive feeling towards the subject matter itself. Like, are you curious? Do you want to learn more?
So if I'm obsessed with ancient Rome,
You're going to devour books about Roman history?
but if I find economics super dry,
It's going to be a struggle to stay focused, no matter how important it might be.
for sure. And finally, there's the challenge aspect. It's not just about whether you can do something, it's about whether you want to, right?
Exactly. Challenge is all about how much you value succeeding at the task. Does it
Yeah.
feel meaningful to you?
So learning to play a simple song on the piano might not be as motivating as,
Mastering a complex concerto.
because the challenge is greater, so the reward feels bigger.
Right. It's that feeling of, I conquered this difficult thing, and that's awesome.
Gotcha. Okay, so those are the four horsemen of initial motivation, according to Vollmeyer and Reinberg. But how did they actually measure all this stuff? You can't just look inside someone's head and see how motivated they are.
Well, they're psychologists. They've got their ways. They developed this questionnaire called the Questionnaire on Current Motivation, or QCM for short. It's designed to capture those initial feelings right when someone's introduced to a task, before they even start working on it.
So, like, here's what you're going to learn. How do you feel right now?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And to make sure the QCM was actually measuring what they intended, they did some clever tests.
Oh, like what?
They gave people different tasks with varying levels of difficulty. One was a simple children's game, Battleship,
I love Battleship.
right? Easy to grasp, not too much pressure. Then they gave them a tougher problem-solving task, the Tower of Hanoi.
That one's a bit more brain-bending.
Definitely. And as they predicted, the QCM scores changed depending on the task. People felt more confident and less anxious about Battleship, while the Tower of Hanoi made them a bit more apprehensive. But their general interest in the activity stayed pretty consistent across both tasks.
So basically, the QCM could tell that people felt differently about the tasks, which is what you'd expect.
Exactly. It showed that the questionnaire was sensitive to those subtle shifts in initial motivation based on the specific challenge at hand.
And they also tested the reliability of the QCM, right? Like, how consistent are the scores?
Yep, they looked at something called Cronbach's alpha, which basically measures how well the questions of the questionnaire hang together.
Yeah.
And the scores were pretty good, consistently in the .70s and .80s.
Which means...
It's a reliable tool. You can trust that it's actually measuring what it claims to measure.
Okay, so they had a good way to measure initial motivation. But people are complicated. It's not like everyone fits neatly into one category of motivated or not motivated.
Right, and that's where it gets even more interesting. They used a statistical technique called cluster analysis to look for patterns in how people scored on the QCM.
So instead of just motivated or not motivated, they found...
Different motivational profiles. Groups of people who tended to share similar patterns of feelings towards learning tasks.
What kind of profiles did they find?
Well, the first one was pretty much what you'd expect. The highly motivated group. These folks were super interested in the task, saw it as a challenge, believed they could succeed, and had low anxiety. They were like, bring it on.
The ideal learners, basically.
Pretty much. Then there was the other end of the spectrum, the lowly motivated group. Low interest, low challenge, low belief in success, and even low anxiety. They just didn't seem very invested in the whole thing.
Right now, whatever.
Yeah, kinda. But then there's this third group, and this is where it gets fascinating. They called them the high anxiety group.
So these folks were just super anxious about everything.
Well, not exactly. They had low belief in success and low interest, similar to the lowly motivated group. But they also felt a high degree of challenge and, here's the kicker, the highest levels of anxiety out of all three groups.
So they were kind of torn, right? Not that into the task, didn't think they'd do well, but still felt challenged by it and super anxious about failing.
Yeah, like a weird mix of feeling pressured and unsure. And what's really interesting is how these different motivational profiles actually played out in terms of performance.
Like, who did the best?
Well, no surprise, the highly motivated group aced it. The lowly motivated group, as you'd expect, didn't fare so well.
Makes sense. But what about the high anxiety group?
They landed somewhere in the middle.
Really? I would have thought all that anxiety would make them completely crash and burn.
Right. It's counterintuitive. But it seems like that feeling of challenge, even coupled with anxiety, actually pushed them to try harder.
So anxiety's not always a bad thing, I guess.
It can be a double-edged sword. It might get you moving, but it might not be the most enjoyable or effective way to learn.
Like you're grinding away, but not really in the zone?
Exactly. So that initial motivation definitely sets the stage. But then there are those mediators we talked about, the things that bridge the gap between those initial feelings and the final outcome.
Right. Those are the factors that get influenced by your initial motivation and then go on to affect how well you learn. So let's break those down, starting with duration and frequency of learning.
Basically, how much time and effort you put in.
Pretty simple, right? More motivated, more time spent learning.
Makes sense. But it's important. They found that higher initial motivation really does lead to more persistence. People are more likely to stick with it even when it gets tough. And that can make a huge difference, especially for folks who are starting with less prior knowledge.
Because if you give up easily, you're never going to learn anything new.
Right. You got to keep at it.
Okay, so then there's the use of systematic learning strategies. This sounds like it's less about how much you learn and more about how you learn.
Exactly. This is about the methods you use to try and understand the material. Are you just passively reading, or are you actively engaging with the information?
Like taking notes, highlighting, testing yourself.
All those good study habits. And they found that initial motivation plays a role here too. If you're really motivated to learn something deeply, you're more likely to use those more effective, systematic strategies.
But how do you actually measure something like that? It seems tricky.
It is. They acknowledge that it's hard to just rely on people saying what they do because sometimes our actions don't match our intentions.
Like, oh yeah, I totally take detailed notes, but then your notebook's empty.
Exactly. So in one of their studies, they used a very specific task, something called a linear system.
Sounds complicated.
It's basically like trying to figure out the relationship between different inputs and outputs. Imagine you're trying to adjust the settings on a complex machine to get a specific result.
Okay, I can picture that.
So in this context, they considered vary one thing at a time to be the most systematic strategy. Like change one setting, see what happens, then change another one.
Instead of just randomly pushing buttons and hoping for the best.
Right. And they were able to reliably track whether people were using this strategy or not by observing their actions during the task.
So they weren't just relying on self-reporting.
Nope. They were watching people actually do the task. And their analysis showed that higher initial motivation, especially a combination of interest, feeling challenged, and believing in success, did indeed lead to more systematic learning strategies. And guess what? Those strategies, along with higher motivation during learning, led to better knowledge and performance.
So the way you feel at the start really does influence how you approach the task, which then affects how much you learn. It's all connected.
It's all connected.
What about the third mediator, motivational state during learning? How is that different from initial motivation?
That's your level of motivation while you're actually in the thick of it, engaged in the task.
Yeah.
It's how you're feeling in the moment, and it can change based on what's happening. Are you making progress? Are you confused?
Yeah.
Are you enjoying it?
So even if you start out super pumped, if you hit a roadblock and get frustrated, that's going to affect how well you learn.
Exactly. That ongoing motivation helps you persevere and stay focused even when things get challenging. It's what keeps you going.
And then we have the final mediator, which they called functional state, but they mainly looked at it through the lens of flow.
Flow state. That magical feeling when you're totally absorbed in something. Time flies by, you're in the zone.
We've all been there, right?
Absolutely. And they wanted to know if that initial motivation could actually lead to experiencing flow during learning.
But how do you even measure something like flow? It seems so subjective.
They used the Flow Short Scale, or FKS, which is a questionnaire designed to capture those key characteristics of flow.
Like what?
Things like feeling that perfect balance between challenge and skill, being completely present in the moment, getting clear feedback on your progress, intense concentration, a distorted sense of time, and a feeling of effortlessness.
Like you're just gliding through the task, almost on autopilot.
Yeah, kind of like that. And they found some really interesting stuff.
Tell me more.
Well, in one study, they looked at a French language class. Students who started out more motivated, especially those who were interested in French and saw it as a challenge, were more likely to experience flow during class.
Makes sense. If you're into it, you're more likely to get lost in it.
Exactly. And then, get this, those who experienced flow actually did better on the final exam.
Wow. So being in the zone during class actually translated into better grades weeks later.
It really shows how powerful that state of flow can be for learning. And they found similar results in a statistics class. Students who felt challenged, interested in the material, and believed they could succeed were more likely to experience flow during statistics tasks. And again, flow predicted better performance on the final exam.
So regardless of the subject, that initial motivation and the ability to tap into flow can really make a difference.
Absolutely. It's not just about showing up. It's about showing up ready and engaged.
So taking a step back, what does all this mean for us? What's the big takeaway from Vollmeyer and Reinberg's work?
It all comes down to this. Pay attention to how you feel when you're first approaching a new learning challenge. Those initial feelings, confidence, interest, challenge, even anxiety, they're not just fleeting emotions. They actually shape the entire learning process.
So it's like setting the stage for the whole performance.
Exactly. And being aware of those initial feelings can give you a real advantage. If you notice you're not feeling very motivated or you're feeling super anxious, you can try to adjust your approach.
Like maybe break down the task into smaller steps to boost your confidence, or try to find something interesting about the topic to spark your curiosity.
Right. It's all about being more conscious of your starting point and how it might affect your journey. Now, they did acknowledge that they didn't explore every single motivational concept out there. There's always more to learn.
Like, what about those people who are super goal-oriented? Does that affect their initial motivation?
That's a great question, and one they didn't specifically address in this research. There's definitely room for future studies to dig deeper into those nuances. And they also acknowledge the challenges of accurately measuring things like motivation during learning and finding ways to assess learning strategies that work across different types of tasks. It's not a perfect science.
Right, every task is different, and every person is different, too.
Absolutely. But even with those limitations, the fact that they were able to demonstrate these key relationships between initial motivation and learning outcomes is huge. It really highlights the power of that initial spark.
So for you, our listener, here's something to ponder. Think back to a time when you were super excited to learn something new. How did that affect your approach, your persistence, and ultimately your success? And then flip it. Think about a time when you felt unmotivated or anxious about learning something. Knowing what we know now about flow and the importance of systematic strategies, how might you approach that situation differently?
And if you're really interested in diving deeper into this stuff, I highly recommend checking out some of the theories and models that Vollmeyer and Reinberg drew on, like self-efficacy theory, flow theory, and different approaches to self-regulated learning. There's a whole world of fascinating research out there just waiting to be explored.
That's some great advice. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of motivation and learning. We hope you learned something new and maybe even discovered a few ways to make your own learning experiences more enjoyable and effective. Until next time.